Welcome back to another episode of Spiritual Workings. Today we are going to be talking about witchcraft. Witchcraft is a bit of a broad term, so I think it might be easiest to sort of define what it is at its core. When looked at in the most simple way, witchcraft is about manifesting. We might think of manifesting in the sense of trying to achieve something, maybe a goal like making more money, trying to get into a new career field, find a relationship, get a new house, new car, etc. When trying to manifest, a lot of people might take different approaches. Of course, there's some people that are going to just really think about what they want. You could consider praying to be a form of manifesting. You're asking a higher spiritual being to help you achieve whatever goals you're wanting to. Another avenue to that could be a more physical aspect of manifesting, such as witchcraft. Witchcraft is often going to involve spells, ceremonies, and the use of different tools or items to try to manifest something. Oftentimes, it's very elaborate. You might be trying to say a spell, sometimes from another language, or using something like a spell book. Other people find that they like using things from nature, like herbs, making oils, or even using something like a candle. Now, an interesting note on that is whether if you realize it or not, you've probably done candle magic before in your life, whether if you realize it or not. You do it once every year on your birthday when you blow out a candle and make a wish. So, when looking at witchcraft, we can start looking at how different people approach it. Obviously, witchcraft is very broad in and of itself. Different avenues to reach that can be something like Wicca, which is a religion. So just to be clear, not all Wiccans are witches and not all witches are Wiccans. There is a distinction between the two, but it is one avenue some people use to approach witchcraft. Now, I'm not going to dive too deep into Wicca just because that could be a whole nother video if you guys were interested in that. I do highly recommend Scott Cunningham if you are interested in Wicca. I did consider becoming a Wiccan for a little while, and I was practicing witchcraft. I ultimately found that just wasn't really the avenue for me. I haven't really talked much about my own spiritual practice, but in general, I tend to be led towards something closer to maybe shamanism. I don't particularly identify with any religion. I do also really like things like Buddhism and Taoism, but in general, don't really practice one specific religion or spiritual practice. Now, if witchcraft is something you're curious about entering, then I think there's certain things to consider. Some people might say that there's a distinction between white magic and black magic, which could also be worded as good or bad magic. Now, of course, there's going to be some people within the witchcraft community that don't feel that there is a distinction, that all magic is just magic. There really is no good or bad. Other people, such as Wiccan practitioners, are going to look at it as more in that lens of white magic versus black magic. Now, for you personally, you're going to have to decide yourself what that looks like. Obviously, if we're looking at something that could be considered like black magic, that might be a little bit more in the vein of like doing hexes or curses or working with darker spiritual beings, something maybe a little bit similar to like voodoo. Now, as far as other approaches, you could be looking at something like a green witch or like an herbalist. So someone who's really out in nature, maybe working with like elementals, you like working with plants and herbs and oils and stuff like that. Another approach could be candle magic, which is something that I've always been really drawn towards. That could be incorporating, herbs and oils and stuff like that into a candle itself, but then using that candle as your physical manifestation. Now, oftentimes when people are doing witchcraft, they might be doing it as a solo practitioner or as a group, also known sometimes as a coven. Now, I have actually participated in group ceremonies before, or a coven ritual before. Oftentimes this might be on a full moon, but I've also done it during the day. A lot of witches are very drawn towards the moon. For example, you could make something like moon water, in which you place water out in the full moon to kind of help you with doing spells or different manifestations. Oftentimes, if you are going to be doing witchcraft, you might use something like this, which is called an Athane. It's not a sharp knife, but it's purely for ceremonial purposes, in which you would cast a circle, and this casting of a circle, for me, is sort of similar to something within shamanism, which is like sacred space, but it has a little bit more of a purpose in the sense that not only is it maybe keeping negative entities and energies out, but it's also helping to build like a ball of energy inside of that, so that way you can really manifest what you want and release it out into the world. Now, with that said, obviously a lot of times people might be using wands. So I made this particular wand on one of the pagan holidays. And if you guys are interested about paganism, I can dive a little bit more into that in the future as well. As far as the wand itself, though, obviously that's just helping you with manifesting. So if we're seeing there's a lot of tools within witchcraft that are helping you to manifest, something like a chalice. You might actually see some people use something like a witch's cauldron. There's a lot of different tools that you can use. This is the witch's broom. Obviously, we think of witches riding around on a broom, and they weren't actually riding around on a broom historically, but there were brooms involved because they're actually really great at cleaning space. You can also keep this hanging over a door, and it will actually act as a protective totem to sort of keep negative entities and energies from entering a space. So this is specifically for like an altar. I use this one to clear a lot of the negative energy away from my altar. And to this day, I actually still have my altar set up more in a Wiccan setup, even though I've gone away from that. It is one thing that I've still kept to this day, in which you keep your energy flowing from the left to the right, and you're trying to use something like salt to clear the energy as it's entering, and then it's helping you to manifest as you're going out towards the right. Now, another tool that you could use would be somewhere to keep all of your spells or all of your research, all of your notes, anything that you want to keep written down, and that's known as a grimoire, or within Wicca specifically, it's known as a Book of Shadows. So this right here is my old Book of Shadows. You can obviously create your own Book of Shadows or grimoire, even if you're not really doing witchcraft specifically. I don't really have spells in here per se. What I like to keep in here was a lot of the stuff I was learning at the time. I was studying tarot or moon phases or looking at palmistry and Reiki and stuff like that. It just kind of acted as a place for me to keep all those notes. Now, if you are someone who is considering becoming a witch or getting into witchcraft, I would highly recommend that you do a lot of research first. I spent months reading and trying to learn as much about it as I could. Within Wicca, there's something that's known as like a year and a day before you should really start practicing. Now, I don't think you have to wait a year and a day, but I think you should kind of see if you're actually really drawn towards something or not, or if it just sounds good. For me personally, I found that I wasn't drawn towards witchcraft, and that's not because there was anything inherently wrong with it. I think just on a soul level, it just didn't quite fit what I wanted to do with my spiritual practice. But with that said, I do find that there's a lot of people that are drawn towards witchcraft purely because of the aesthetic purposes. There's a lot of this like Instagram and TikTok witchcraft that sort of goes on. And in many ways, I think what it is it's drawing people in that know that they are open to spirituality and are having the spiritual awakening, and they're not quite sure how to approach that. So perhaps witchcraft is the right avenue for you, or perhaps it's not. Either way, you need to make that decision for yourself, and don't let social media or pop culture try to determine what direction you should be going. That's it for this episode. If this was helpful for you guys, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And leave a comment down below what you guys would be interested in hearing about for the next episode. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. If you guys are interested in learning more about witchcraft, I will go ahead and leave a link to Scott Cunningham's book down in the description below, as well as links to other books that I found to be useful in my study of the subject. I'll also include links to some of these spiritual tools in which I talked about in this episode to make it easier for you guys to find. And I wanted to make a little announcement that one of my friends recently released the first chapter in her book, Coven of Moon and Mist. If you guys are interested in checking out a fictional book on witchcraft, I highly recommend the book, so I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well.